What if I told you that a terrified 4-year-old girl, trembling and crying over her unconscious mother, randomly dialed a phone number that would change everything? What if that random call, those desperate little fingers pressing buttons through tears, connected her to a billionaire sitting in a Manhattan boardroom, a man who had no idea he was a father? This is not fiction. This is not a movie plot someone dreamed up in Hollywood. This is the true story of how fate reached through a phone line and brought together 3 lives that were never supposed to meet. A struggling single mother who had given up everything for her daughter, a powerful businessman who thought he had everything but felt empty inside, and a little girl whose innocent cry for help became the bridge between 2 worlds that had been separated for nearly 5 years. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever been so exhausted that your body just gave out? Have you ever pushed yourself so hard, skipping meals, working double shifts, putting everyone else first, that one morning your legs simply refused to hold you up anymore? For single parents out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That constant juggling act. That never-ending worry about bills, about your child's future, about whether you're doing enough. You sacrifice sleep. You sacrifice meals. You sacrifice your own health because your child comes first. Always. But what happens when you collapse? What happens when your 4-year-old daughter, your whole world, watches you fall to the kitchen floor and doesn't know if you're ever going to wake up? This is where our story begins. In a small town called Willowvale, where a young mother named Anara had been fighting invisible battles for years, where her daughter Nalani thought butterflies were magical creatures that could fix anything, where one ordinary Tuesday morning would shatter their quiet life and set off a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. By the end of this story, you'll witness how a random phone call exposed secrets buried for years, how anger transformed into understanding, how a little girl's desperate act of love reunited a family that never knew they were broken. Welcome back to Mr. Roman's Story Vault. If you're new here, you've just found a place where real stories touch real hearts. We share narratives that remind us why life is worth living, why love is worth fighting for, and why second chances exist for a reason. Before we continue, do me a small favor. If you believe in fate, in miracles, in stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit that subscribe button right now. Join this family of story lovers, and drop a comment telling me, do you believe some things happen for a reason? Now settle in, take a breath, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. Let's begin. Willowvale was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody. Nestled about 40 miles outside of New York City, it had tree-lined streets, front porches, with rocking chairs, and neighbors who still waved at each other every morning. It was quiet, safe, the kind of place where children rode bicycles until the streetlights came on and doors stayed unlocked at night. On Oak Street, tucked between 2 larger homes with manicured lawns, sat a modest yellow house with slightly chipped paint around the window frames. The fence needed fixing. The garden had seen better days. But inside those walls lived more love than most mansions could ever contain. This was home for Anara Lomax and her 4-year-old daughter Nalani. Tuesday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the lace curtains in the kitchen. The smell of soup simmered on the stove, a simple recipe Anara had learned from her grandmother. She hummed softly while stirring, her slender frame moving slowly, almost mechanically. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night spent worrying about bills, about work, about everything. At the small wooden table behind her, Nalani sat in her favorite butterfly pajamas, stacking colorful building blocks into wobbly towers. Her braids were slightly messy from sleep, tied with pink ribbons that had come loose overnight. A worn teddy bear named Mr. Buttons sat propped against her juice cup, watching over breakfast preparations like a loyal guardian. "Mummy, Mummy, look." Nalani's voice rang out with pure excitement. "I saw butterflies outside. 3 of them, orange ones." Anara turned from the stove, forcing a smile despite the throbbing headache that had started an hour ago and refused to leave. 3 butterflies? Wow, baby girl. That's so special. They were dancing, Mummy. Dancing just for me. Nalani giggled, her grey-green eyes sparkling with wonder. At 4 years old, everything was magical to her. Butterflies were fairies, rainbows were bridges to Candyland, and her mother was the strongest, most beautiful woman in the entire universe. She had no idea how close that universe was to crumbling. Anara gripped the counter's edge, steadying herself as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She blinked hard, trying to focus on the soup bubbling gently before her. When had she last eaten a proper meal? Yesterday? The day before? She couldn't remember. Every dollar went toward Nalani, her food, her clothes, her medicine when she caught colds. Anara survived on coffee, toast scraps, and sheer willpower. Working at the Willowvale Public Library during the week paid barely enough to cover rent. Weekend shifts at the grocery store helped with utilities. Some months, she managed to put away $20 for emergencies. Most months, emergencies ate through whatever savings she had. But Nalani never went hungry. Nalani always had clean clothes. Nalani believed her mommy was invincible. "Come eat your oatmeal, sweetheart," Anara called out, her voice strained. She ladled the warm cereal into a small pink bowl, Nalani's favorite, decorated with cartoon princesses. Nalani hopped off her chair and skipped over, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm. She climbed onto the kitchen chair and peered at her breakfast. "Can I have extra honey, Mummy? Please, please, please. Just a little." Anara reached for the honey jar, but her hand trembled. The jar felt heavier than it should. Everything felt heavier today. She managed to drizzle honey over the oatmeal before setting the jar down with a clatter. Her vision blurred momentarily. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. "No, not now. Please, not now." Anara gripped the back of Nalani's chair, knuckles whitening. She took a deep breath, willing her body to cooperate. "Just get through breakfast. Just get Nalani fed and dressed. You can rest later." "Mummy." Nalani looked up, spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. "Your face looks funny." "I'm fine, baby." The words came out weaker than intended. "Eat your oatmeal." But Anara wasn't fine. Her head pounded like a drum. Her legs felt like they were filled with sand. The room began to spin, slowly at first, like a carousel starting up. She reached for the glass of juice on the counter, desperate for something to anchor herself. Her fingers never made it. The glass slipped. Juice splattered across the tiles. Anara's knees buckled without warning, and she crumpled to the kitchen floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The last thing she heard before darkness swallowed her was Nalani's scream. "Mummy!" Nalani scrambled off her chair so fast that it toppled backward with a crash. Mr. Buttons fell forgotten to the floor. The little girl dropped to her knees beside her mother's still body, shaking her shoulder with tiny, desperate hands. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up. Please wake up." Anara didn't move. Her eyes were closed. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but Nalani didn't understand what that meant. All she knew was that her mother, her entire world, was lying on the cold kitchen floor and wouldn't answer her. Tears streamed down Nalani's cheeks. Her breath came in hiccuping gasps. She shook Anara's arm again, harder this time. "Mommy, the butterflies will help you. Wake up, Mommy." Nothing. Panic seized Nalani's small heart. What was she supposed to do? She was only 4. She didn't know about doctors or hospitals or ambulances. She just knew that when something was wrong, Mommy always fixed it. But Mommy couldn't fix anything right now. Through her tears, Nalani spotted her mother's phone resting on the kitchen table. The screen was dark, but she had seen Mommy use it before. Mommy pressed buttons and talked to people. Maybe if Nalani pressed buttons, someone would come help. With trembling legs, the 4-year-old pushed herself up from the floor. She grabbed the phone with both hands, her small fingers barely able to hold it steady. The screen lit up at her touch. Nalani had no idea what she was doing. She just knew she needed to find help. Nalani stared at the glowing screen through blurry, tear-filled eyes. She had watched her mother use this phone 100 times. Mommy would tap the screen, hold it to her ear, and talk to people. Sometimes Grandma, sometimes the nice lady from the library. The phone brought voices from far away. Maybe it could bring help. The little girl's fingers trembled as she pressed the screen. Random numbers appeared: 7, 1, 8, 5, 5, 5. She didn't know what the numbers meant. She couldn't read yet. She just kept pressing, the way she had seen adults do, hoping something magical would happen. When a green button appeared, she pressed that too. The phone began to ring. 40 miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom on the 47th floor of Fairchild Tower in Manhattan, a very different morning was unfolding. Ashton Fairchild sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, surrounded by executives in expensive suits. Charts and projections covered the screens behind him. A $12 billion merger was on the table, the kind of deal that made headlines and shaped industries. At 28 years old, Ashton had built an empire. Fairchild Industries owned stakes in technology, real estate, and renewable energy. Forbes had featured him in a cover story about young billionaires reshaping industry. Business magazines called him a visionary. Wall Street called him untouchable. But those who knew Ashton personally, and there weren't many, saw something else behind those sharp grey-green eyes. A restlessness, a quiet emptiness that no amount of money seemed to fill. He had everything a man could want: penthouse apartments, private jets, invitations to exclusive events around the world. Yet most nights he sat alone in his sprawling Manhattan residence, staring at the city lights and wondering if this was really all there was. Mr. Fairchild, the projected quarterly returns show a 17% increase if we proceed with the acquisition, his CFO was saying, pointing to a graph that meant nothing to Ashton in that moment. His mind had drifted elsewhere. Lately, it kept drifting to the past, to a time before the billions, before the empire, when he was just a college student with big dreams and a girl who made him believe anything was possible. Anara. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years, but it echoed through his thoughts more often than he cared to admit. Whatever happened to her? Where did she go after everything fell apart? A soft vibration in his ear pulled him back to the present. His Bluetooth earpiece, the sleek, custom-designed device he wore during meetings, was signaling an incoming call. He glanced at his phone discreetly. Unknown number. Willowvale area code. Willowvale. The name hit him like a punch to the chest. He knew that town. He had driven through it countless times during college, when he and Anara would escape the city for quiet weekends. She had talked about moving there someday, raising a family in a place where life moved slower. His thumb hovered over the decline button. This was probably a wrong number. A telemarketer. Something meaningless. But something stopped him. Call it instinct. Call it fate. Call it the universe intervening in ways no one could explain. Ashton pressed accept. For a moment, there was nothing but static and muffled sounds. He almost hung up. But just as his finger moved toward the screen, a voice cut through, high-pitched, broken with sobs, absolutely terrified. Hello? Hello? It was a child, a little girl. Ashton straightened in his chair, every executive in the room fading into background noise. Hello, who is this? My mommy collapsed. The girl screamed, her words tumbling out between gasping cries. She won't wake up. Please help my mommy. The boardroom fell silent. Ashton's face drained of color. His CFO stopped mid-sentence, confusion spreading across the table as everyone watched their CEO grip his phone like a lifeline. Sweetheart, listen to me. Ashton's voice dropped low, gentle, completely transformed from the commanding tone he used in business. Where are you right now? Can you tell me where you are? I'm in the kitchen, Nalani wailed. Mummy fell down and she won't wake up and I'm scared. Ashton's heart hammered against his ribs. He rose from his chair, one hand raised to silence the room. Okay. You're being so brave. What's your name, sweetheart? Nalani. The name came out in a hiccup. Nalani. That's a beautiful name. He forced calm into his voice while his mind raced at 1,000 miles per hour. Nalani, is there a grown-up nearby? A neighbor? Anyone who can help? I don't know. She was crying harder now. I just want Mummy to wake up. Ashton snapped his fingers at his assistant, who immediately jumped into action. He scribbled on a notepad. Trace this call. 911 now. Nalani, I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? Help is coming. I promise you, help is coming. Through the chaos of the moment, he caught fragments of sound in the background. A television playing softly, birds chirping, the quiet hum of a suburban morning shattered by tragedy. His assistant rushed back, whispering urgently, the call traced to Oak Street, Willowvale. Emergency services are being dispatched now. Oak Street, Willowvale. The words echoed in Ashton's skull like thunder. He knew that street. He had walked down that street years ago, holding hands with a woman he thought he'd spend forever with. Sir, his assistant looked at him with concern. Are you all right? Ashton wasn't all right. His hands were shaking. His chest felt tight, because somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrifying possibility was taking shape. What if this wasn't a coincidence? What if that little girl crying on the phone was connected to the only woman he had ever truly loved? Without another word, Ashton strode toward the door. Cancel everything, he commanded over his shoulder. I'm leaving, now. The elevator descended from the 47th floor at lightning speed, but Ashton's mind traveled even faster, backward through time. Through years of success and solitude, all the way back to a cramped college apartment where his life had once made perfect sense. Her name had been Anara Lomax. They met during junior year at Columbia University in a crowded lecture hall where neither of them was paying attention to the professor. She sat 2 rows ahead of him, her dark curls cascading over her shoulders as she sketched in her notebook instead of taking notes. He spent the entire class trying to work up the courage to talk to her. When he finally did, stumbling over his words like a fool, she laughed. Not at him, but with him. That laugh changed everything. For nearly 3 years, Ashton and Anara were inseparable. They studied together in coffee shops until closing time. They walked through Central Park during autumn, kicking through fallen leaves and dreaming about the future. She wanted to write children's books. He wanted to build something that mattered. They talked about getting married someday, about having kids, about escaping to a quiet town where life wasn't measured by deadlines and dollar signs. Willowvale. She had mentioned it so many times. A small town outside the city where her grandmother once lived. Peaceful streets, friendly neighbors, the kind of place where you could raise a family without losing your soul. Ashton had promised her they would go there together. He had promised her a lot of things, but promises, as it turned out, were easier to make than to keep. Senior year brought pressure from every direction. His father, a cold and calculating businessman, had laid out an ultimatum: join the family company and prove himself worthy of the Fairchild name, or be cut off entirely. No inheritance, no support, nothing. Ashton chose ambition. He told himself he was doing it for both of them, building a foundation so they could have the life they dreamed about. But the long hours consumed him. The meetings pulled him away. He missed dinners, forgot anniversaries, became a ghost in his own relationship. The breakup happened on a rainy night in April, 5 years ago. Anara stood in the doorway of his apartment, tears streaming down. Her face telling him she couldn't compete with his career anymore. She needed someone present, someone who chose her, not just when it was convenient, but always. He let her walk away. That decision haunted him more than any business failure ever could. He threw himself into work to numb the pain. Within 3 years, he had transformed it from a struggling legacy business into a billion-dollar empire. Within 4 years, he had become one of the youngest billionaires in America. Magazine covers, television interviews, a penthouse overlooking the entire city. But none of it filled the void Anara left behind. He never tried to find her. Pride, perhaps. Fear of rejection, certainly. He convinced himself she had moved on, found someone better, built a life he had no right to interrupt. So he buried the memories and pretended they didn't hurt. Until today. Standing in the elevator as floors ticked by, Ashton replayed the phone call in his mind. A little girl named Nalani, a mother who collapsed, an address in Willowvale, Oak Street to be exact. Oak Street. He remembered that street. 5 years ago, during one of their weekend drives, Anara had pointed to a small yellow house with a garden out front. "That's where I'd want to live someday," she had said, squeezing his hand. "Right there. Can you see it?" He had nodded, smiling, never imagining a future where he wouldn't be beside her. Now, a child was crying on a phone. A child in Willowvale. A child whose mother was unconscious on the floor. The math screamed at him. 4 years old. The breakup was 5 years ago. If Anara had been pregnant when she left, no, it couldn't be. But what if it was? What if, somewhere in that small town he used to dream about, there was a daughter he never knew existed? A child who carried his blood, his features, his name, even if she didn't know it. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. Ashton's driver was already waiting, keys in hand, sensing the urgency from the frantic messages sent by his assistant. Ashton didn't speak. He climbed into the back of the black sedan, his jaw clenched tight, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. He had to get to Willowvale. He had to see for himself, because if that little girl was his daughter, everything was about to change. The black sedan tore through Manhattan traffic like a bullet through water. Red lights meant nothing. Speed limits were suggestions. Ashton had made one phone call to the New York police commissioner, a man who owed him several favors, and suddenly obstacles melted away. ETA to Willowvale. Ashton's voice was tight, controlled, but anyone who knew him could hear the cracks forming beneath the surface. 45 minutes if traffic cooperates, sir, his driver responded, eyes fixed on the road. I'm pushing as fast as safely possible. Push faster. In the back seat, Ashton's fingers drummed against his thigh. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from board members, confused executives. Journalists asking for comments on his sudden departure from the meeting. He ignored all of them. His assistant, Marcus, had stayed behind to manage the chaos, but remained on the line through Ashton's earpiece. "Sir, emergency services confirmed they arrived at the Oak Street address approximately 8 minutes ago. The woman is conscious but being evaluated. The child is safe." Conscious. She was conscious. Ashton exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. But relief was quickly swallowed by 1,000 new questions. Was it really Anara? Was the child really his? How could this be happening after all these years? Did they give a name? He asked quietly. The woman's name? A pause. Marcus was typing rapidly on the other end. "Give me a moment, sir. Medical privacy laws make this complicated, but I'm working on it." Ashton stared out the window as the city skyline gradually gave way to suburban sprawl. Strip malls replaced skyscrapers. Highways narrowed into 2-lane roads lined with trees just beginning to show their autumn colors. The world outside grew quieter, softer, more like the place Anara had always loved. His mind kept circling back to that phone call. Nalani. The girl had said her name was Nalani. He rolled the name over in his thoughts, testing how it felt. It was beautiful, unusual, the kind of name Anara would choose. And her voice, that desperate, frightened voice crying out for her mother. Something about it had reached into his chest and grabbed hold of his heart. He didn't understand the connection, couldn't explain it logically, but the pull was undeniable. What if she really was his daughter? What if, for 4 years, a little girl had been growing up without knowing her father existed, learning to walk, to talk, to laugh, all without him there to witness a single moment? The thought made him physically ill. He had missed so much. First words, first steps, birthday candles blown out, scraped knees kissed better, bedtime stories read in silly voices. 4 years of precious memories that he could never get back. If she was his, the if burned like acid. He needed certainty. He needed to look into that child's eyes and know, one way or another, whether the universe had just revealed the greatest secret of his life. His phone buzzed again. Marcus. "Sir, I have a name. The homeowner listed at the Oak Street address is Anara Lomax." Ashton closed his eyes. There it was. Confirmation. The woman lying on that kitchen floor, the mother of the little girl who had called him. By pure chance, was the same woman he had let walk out of his life 5 years ago. The same woman he had never stopped loving. "Sir," Marcus's voice was cautious. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." The words were automatic, meaningless. "How much longer?" 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Ashton leaned his head against the cool glass of the window, watching the countryside blur past. Fate was a strange thing. He had spent years convincing himself that some doors were meant to stay closed, that some chapters ended and you simply had to move on. But here he was, racing toward a past he thought was gone forever, pulled back by the voice of a child he didn't know existed. Now, before we continue, I want to pause and ask you something. Do you believe in fate? Do you believe that some connections are so powerful, so meant to be, that the universe itself will find a way to bring people back together? Maybe you've experienced it yourself, a chance encounter, a wrong number that turned out to be the right call, a moment where everything aligned in ways that couldn't be explained. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where fate stepped in and changed your life? Because for Ashton, fate wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. The car pressed on toward Willowvale. While Ashton's luxury sedan raced toward Willowvale, let's step back and understand the woman. Waiting at the end of that journey, the woman whose life had taken a very different path. Anara Lomax had once believed in fairy tales. Growing up in a modest Brooklyn apartment with a single mother who worked 2 jobs, she learned early that love was something you fought for. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night and worked retail during the day, all so Anara could attend good schools and dream big dreams. "You're going to be somebody," her mother used to say, kissing her forehead before leaving for the night shift. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Anara took those words to heart. She earned scholarships. She made it to Columbia. She fell in love with a boy named Ashton Fairchild, who looked at her like she hung the moon. For a while, she believed the fairy tale was coming true. But fairy tales don't account for ambition that consumes everything in its path. They don't prepare you for watching the man you love slowly disappear into boardrooms and business deals. They don't warn you that sometimes love isn't enough to hold 2 people together. The night Anara walked away from Ashton, she was already carrying his child. She just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks later, sitting alone in the bathroom of her tiny apartment, she stared at the positive pregnancy test and felt her world collapse around her. She was 22 years old, single, unemployed, and pregnant by a man who had chosen money over her. The thought of calling Ashton crossed her mind. More than once, she picked up the phone, ready to dial his number, ready to tell him everything. But fear stopped her every time. What if he didn't believe her? What if he accused her of trying to trap him? What if he offered money to make the problem go away? The Ashton she remembered might have understood. But the Ashton who had become a cold, distant workaholic, that man was a stranger. She couldn't bear the thought of her child being seen as a burden, a mistake, an inconvenience in the grand plan of a billionaire's empire. So, Anara made a decision. She would raise this baby alone. She would give her child everything she had, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. She moved to Willowvale, the town she had always loved, where her grandmother's memories still lingered in the streets. She found a cheap rental on Oak Street, a small yellow house that needed work but had good bones and a yard for a child to play in. She took a job at the local library, and when that wasn't enough, she added weekend shifts at the grocery store. Every penny went toward Nalani, every ounce of energy, every drop of love in Anara's heart. She learned to live on almost nothing, skipped meals so her daughter could have seconds, wore the same worn-out shoes for 3 winters while making sure Nalani had new boots every year, stayed up late mending clothes, cutting coupons, calculating whether they could afford the electricity bill and groceries in the same month. It was exhausting. It was lonely. Some nights, after putting Nalani to bed, Anara would sit on the kitchen floor and cry silently, wondering if she had made the right choice, wondering if she should have swallowed her pride and told Ashton the truth. But every morning, Nalani would wake up with a smile that could light up the darkest room, and Anara would remember why she fought so hard. That little girl was worth everything. The hardest part wasn't the poverty. It wasn't the exhaustion or the loneliness or the constant worry about money. The hardest part was the questions. "Mummy, why don't I have a daddy?" The first time Nalani asked, she was barely 3 years old, standing in the park watching other children run to their fathers. Anara's heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Some families are different, baby," she had said, pulling Nalani into a hug. "Some families are just mommies and their little girls. And that's okay, because we have each other. That's all we need." Nalani seemed to accept the answer, for now. But Anara knew more questions would come, harder questions. She dreaded the day when "Where's my daddy?" would become "Why didn't he want me?" How do you explain to a child that her father doesn't even know she exists? How do you justify a choice made in fear and heartbreak 5 years ago? Anara had no answers. She only had today. Keep working, keep smiling, keep pretending everything was fine, while her body slowly gave out from years of running on empty. Until this morning. Until her legs buckled and the world went dark and her 4-year-old daughter was forced to face the terrifying reality that Mommy wasn't invincible after all. Apart, 2 lives had been running on parallel tracks, one wrapped in wealth, but starving for meaning, the other drowning in hardship but overflowing with love. Neither knew the other's truth. Neither imagined that a child's desperate phone call would become the collision point where those 2 worlds finally met. But fate had other plans. The black sedan was getting closer. Everything was about to change. The black sedan turned onto Oak Street just as the clouds began to gather overhead. What had started as a golden Tuesday morning was slowly surrendering to darker skies, as if the weather itself sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. Ashton leaned forward in his seat, scanning the quiet suburban street through the tinted windows. Modest homes lined both sides, some with tricycles on the lawn, others with American flags waving gently from front porches. It was exactly as he remembered from those long-ago drives with Anara. Peaceful, unassuming, a world away from the steel and glass towers of Manhattan. His heart stopped when he saw it, the yellow house, slightly weathered paint around the window frames, a small garden that had seen better days, an ambulance parked in the driveway, its lights still flashing in silent rotation. "Stop here," Ashton commanded. His voice came out rougher than intended. The driver pulled to the curb 3 houses down, giving Ashton a clear view without drawing immediate attention. For a moment, he simply sat there, frozen, watching the scene unfold through the windshield. 2 paramedics moved around the front porch, their movements calm but purposeful. Medical equipment bags sat open near the door. A neighbor, an elderly woman with silver hair, stood on the adjacent lawn, hand pressed to her chest, watching with obvious concern. But none of that mattered to Ashton. His entire focus locked onto the small figure sitting on the porch steps. A little girl, 4 years old maybe, wearing butterfly pajamas that were now wrinkled and stained with what looked like orange juice. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 messy braids, pink ribbons dangling loose. She clutched a worn teddy bear against her chest like a lifeline, her small body trembling even from this distance. Ashton's breath caught in his throat. Even from 50 feet away, he could see it, the curve of her cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw that he recognized from every mirror he'd ever looked into. That little girl looked like him. Not entirely. She had her mother's rich brown skin, her mother's full lips, her mother's beautiful dark curls. But the eyes, the way she held herself even in fear, the slight furrow between her brows as she watched the adults move around her, those were Fairchild traits, his traits. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the door handle, knuckles turning white, struggling to breathe normally. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't a wild theory born of desperation and old memories. That was his daughter. He had a daughter. For 4 years, she had existed in this world without him, laughing, crying, growing, all without knowing her father's face, all because he had been too proud, too consumed by his empire, to fight for the woman he loved. Before he could process the enormity of that truth, movement near the front door caught his attention. Anara. She emerged from the house supported by a paramedic, a blood pressure cuff still wrapped around her arm. She looked pale, exhausted, her usual radiance dimmed by whatever had caused her collapse. But she was standing. She was conscious. She was alive. And she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. 5 years had changed her, but not in the ways he expected. There were new lines around her eyes. Worry lines, he realized with a pang of guilt. Her frame was thinner than he remembered, the kind of thinness that came from skipped meals rather than gym memberships. Her clothes were simple, practical, worn at the edges. She had been struggling. For years, she had been struggling alone. While he built his empire, she had been here, raising their daughter, fighting to survive, carrying a burden he should have shared. Ashton opened the car door before his mind could talk him out of it. His expensive Italian shoes hit the cracked pavement, and he straightened. His suit jacket, a ridiculous habit given the circumstances. What did clothing matter at a moment like this? He walked toward the house slowly, his heart hammering with each step. The elderly neighbor noticed him first, her eyes widening at the sight of a tall stranger in a designer suit approaching the chaos. The paramedics glanced up briefly, then returned to their work, assuming he was perhaps a relative arriving to help. Nalani saw him next. The little girl's tear-stained face turned toward him as he approached the front gate. Her eyes, those hauntingly familiar eyes, studied him with the innocent curiosity only children possess. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply watched, clutching her teddy bear tighter, as this unknown man entered her world. But it was Anara's reaction that stopped Ashton in his tracks. She had been speaking to the paramedic, nodding along to medical instructions, when something made her look up. Maybe it was the sound of his footsteps. Maybe it was the shift in energy as he entered her space. Or maybe, after all these years, some part of her still sensed his presence the way she always had. Their eyes met. Time seemed to fracture and fold. 5 years of separation compressed into a single electric moment. Ashton saw recognition flash across her face, followed immediately by shock, then confusion, then something that looked terrifyingly like fear. Anara. Her name escaped his lips before he could stop it. A whisper, a prayer, a wound reopening after years of pretending it had healed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from her already pale cheeks. She swayed slightly, and the paramedic reached out to steady her. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" Anara didn't answer. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the ghost standing in her front yard, the man she had loved, the man she had left, the man whose daughter sat just 10 feet away, still not understanding that her entire life was about to change. Ashton took another step forward. "We need to talk." Anara's first instinct was to run. Every protective fiber in her body screamed at her to grab Nalani, retreat into the house, and lock the door against this man who had just materialized from her past like a specter. She had spent 5 years building walls, thick, impenetrable walls designed to keep the world out and keep Nalani safe. Now those walls were cracking and she wasn't ready. "Ma'am?" The paramedic's voice cut through her panic. "Your blood pressure is still elevated. You really should sit down." Anara barely heard him. Her eyes remained fixed on Ashton, standing at the edge of her property, in a suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent. He looked different, older. The boyish softness she remembered had been replaced by sharp angles, and an air of authority that came from years of commanding boardrooms. But those eyes, those grey-green eyes that had once looked at her with so much love, so much promise, they were still the same. And right now, they were locked onto Nalani. Maternal instinct overrode everything else. Anara stepped away from the paramedic and moved toward her daughter with a speed that surprised even herself. "Nalani, baby, come here." Her voice was steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. The little girl looked up at her mother, confusion clouding her features. "Mommy, who's that man? Do you know him?" "It's nobody, sweetheart. Just come inside with Mommy, okay?" But Ashton was faster, not physically, He hadn't moved from his spot near the gate, but his voice carried across the distance, gentle yet unmistakable. "Anara, please. I just want to make sure you're both okay." Nalani's head swiveled toward the stranger. Something flickered in her young eyes. Not fear, but curiosity, recognition of a different kind. The way children sometimes sense things adults have learned to ignore. She tilted her head, studying Ashton with unsettling intensity. "You sound like the man on the phone." Ashton's composure cracked for just a moment. "Yes," he said softly, crouching down to be closer to her level, despite the distance between them. "Yes, sweetheart, that was me. You called me when your mummy got sick." Nalani processed this information with the straightforward logic only a 4-year-old possesses. "You said help was coming. You promised, and help came, didn't it?" Ashton gestured gently toward the paramedics. "I always keep my promises." Something in his voice made Nalani's eyes widen. She looked at him, truly looked at him, in that unguarded way children do before they learn to mask their emotions. Her small brow furrowed. Her grip on Mr. Buttons loosened slightly. "Mommy." Nalani turned to Anara, her voice trembling with a question that made Anara's blood run cold. Is he my daddy?" The world stopped spinning. Anara felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Every nightmare she'd ever had about this moment, every imagined scenario where the truth came crashing down, paled in comparison to the reality of her daughter's innocent question hanging in the autumn air. "Nalani, he looks like me, Mummy." The little girl's voice was matter-of-fact, stating an observation rather than asking a question. "His eyes, they look like my eyes. Grandma always said I got my eyes from somewhere special." Ashton rose slowly, his face a mask of barely contained emotion. His gaze shifted from Nalani to Anara, and in that look was everything. Questions, accusations, pain, hope, all swirling together in a silent storm. "Anara." His voice was low, careful, but she could hear the tremor beneath the surface. "Is she—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than Anara intended. She positioned herself between Ashton and Nalani, a human shield protecting her daughter from truths too heavy for a 4-year-old to carry. "Don't you dare finish that question. You have no right." "I have no right." Something flickered in Ashton's eyes. Hurt, maybe, or anger carefully restrained. "Anara, if she's mine, she's mine." Anara's voice cracked on the word. "She's been mine for 4 years. I carried her. I birthed her. I raised her alone. While you were building your empire and forgetting I ever existed, I never forgot you." The admission escaped him like a confession. "Not for a single day." "That's funny." Anara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was bitter, broken, soaked in years of unshed tears. "Because you certainly forgot to call, forgot to write, forgot to wonder what happened to the woman who loved you more than anything." Ashton stepped closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Anara, I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea." "Mommy." Nalani's small voice interrupted them both. She tugged at Anara's sleeve, her bottom lip quivering. "Why are you yelling? Is the man bad?" The question shattered something in Anara's chest. She knelt down, pulling Nalani into a fierce hug, burying her face in her daughter's hair. "No, baby. No, he's not bad." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Because despite everything, despite 5 years of anger and abandonment, Anara knew that Ashton wasn't a villain. He was just a man who had made terrible choices, just like she had. She felt Ashton's presence behind her, close enough to touch but holding back, respecting a boundary he didn't fully understand yet. "Please," he said quietly, and for the first time, the billionaire CEO sounded like nothing more than a broken man. "Just tell me the truth. Whatever happened between us, whatever I did wrong, I can handle it. But I need to know." "Anara, is Nalani my daughter?" The rain began to fall then, soft drops pattering against the porch roof like tears from the sky itself. Anara closed her eyes. There was no escaping this moment, no running, no hiding. The truth was coming out, whether she was ready or not. Rain dripped from the porch awning, creating a curtain of water between. The two people standing at the edge of 5 years of silence. The paramedics had retreated to their ambulance to give the family privacy, though they remained nearby in case Anara's condition worsened. Lucille, the elderly neighbor, had ushered Nalani inside her own home with promises of cookies and cartoons, sensing that the adults needed space for a conversation long overdue. Now, it was just Ashton and Anara, standing 2 feet apart with a chasm between them. "You want the truth?" Anara's voice was barely audible above the rain. She hugged herself, trembling from cold and emotion alike. "Fine. Here's your truth, Ashton. Yes, Nalani is your daughter." The confirmation hit Ashton like a physical blow. He staggered back half a step, one hand reaching for the porch railing to steady himself, even though he had suspected, even though he had known the moment. He saw Nalani's face. Hearing the words made it devastatingly real. He had a daughter. For 4 years he had been a father, and he never knew. How? The question came out strangled. "How could you not tell me?" Anara's eyes flashed with sudden fire. "How could I not tell you? Are you serious right now? I deserved to know. You deserved nothing." Her voice rose, cutting through the rain like a blade. "You walked away, Ashton. You chose your company over me. You stopped calling. You stopped caring. And by the time I found out I was pregnant, you were already a ghost. I would have come back." Ashton's voice cracked. "If you had told me, I would have been here in a heartbeat. Would you?" Anara stepped closer, rain soaking through her thin sweater. She didn't seem to notice. "The Ashton I knew at the end wasn't the man I fell in love with. He was cold, distant, obsessed with becoming his father. You think I wanted my daughter raised by that version of you?" The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Ashton remembered who he had become during those final months, consumed by pressure, molded by expectations, slowly transforming into everything he once swore he'd never be. "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "My father threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't prove myself. I thought if I just worked hard enough, built something stable, I could come back to you with something to offer. I didn't need your money." Anara's tears mingled with the rain streaming down her face. "I needed you. I needed the man who held my hand during thunderstorms, who read poetry to me at midnight, who promised we'd build a life together in a quiet little town far from the chaos." She gestured at the modest house behind her, paint peeling, gutters rusting, but standing strong nonetheless. "This was that town, Ashton. This was where I came to wait for you. But you never came." Ashton's throat constricted. He had driven through Willowvale so many times over the years, never once, suspecting that just a few streets away, his whole world was waiting. "I wrote letters," he said, "dozens of them, to your old apartment in the city. They all came back undelivered. I moved." Anara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I couldn't afford that apartment after you left. I couldn't afford anything. I worked 2 jobs while pregnant, saved every penny, and bought a bus ticket here because it was the only place that ever felt like hope. Why didn't you contact me? My company has a public address, a phone number, and say what?" Anara's laugh was hollow, broken. "Hello, Ashton Fairchild, billionaire CEO. I'm the ex-girlfriend you abandoned, and by the way, I'm having your baby. How do you think that would have played out? Your lawyers would have torn me apart. The tabloids would have called me a gold digger. I would never. You don't know what you would have done." Her voice shattered on the words. "You were different then. Harder. Every time I picked up the phone to call, I remembered the look on your face that last night, like I was an obstacle to your success instead of the woman you loved. How was I supposed to trust that man with my daughter's heart?" Ashton had no defense, because she was right. He had changed during those final months, twisted by pressure and fear into someone unrecognizable. Someone who might have seen a pregnancy as a complication rather than a blessing. Would he have done the right thing? He wanted to believe yes, but honestly, he wasn't sure. "I'm sorry." The words felt pathetically inadequate, but they were all he had. "I'm so sorry, Anara, for leaving, for not fighting harder, for every single day you spent alone when I should have been here, Anara's shoulders sagged. The anger that had sustained her through this confrontation slowly drained away, leaving behind only exhaustion. Sorry doesn't change 4 years of birthdays you missed. First words you never heard. Nightmares you weren't here to chase away. I know. Ashton stepped toward her slowly, cautiously, the way one approaches a wounded animal. But I'm here now, and I want to make it right. Whatever that takes, however long it takes. I want to know my daughter. I want to be part of her life. Rain continued to fall around them, washing the world clean. Anara looked at the man standing before her, soaked through, stripped of his billionaire armor, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen since their early days together. She wanted to hate him. Part of her still did. But a larger part remembered why she had loved him in the first place. This won't be easy, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not looking for easy. Ashton met her eyes. I'm looking for a second chance. To understand how two people who once loved each other completely could end up strangers raising a child apart, we need to go back. Back to 5 years ago, when everything began to fall apart. Spring semester, senior year at Columbia University. The world was on the edge of graduation, and for Ashton and Anara, the future should have been bright. They had been together for nearly 3 years. They talked about marriage, about children, about escaping the city once they had their degrees and building something real in a place where life moved slower. But pressure has a way of crushing even the strongest bonds. Ashton's father, Malcolm Fairchild, was a man who measured worth in stock portfolios and quarterly earnings. He had built Fairchild Industries from the ground up, and he expected his only son to carry that legacy forward with unwavering dedication. When Ashton announced during winter break that he planned to pursue non-profit work after graduation, something meaningful, something that helped people, Malcolm's response was ice cold. You want to throw away your education on charity work? Fine. Do it without my name and without my money. The ultimatum was clear. Join the company, prove himself worthy of the Fairchild empire, or be disowned completely. No trust fund, no inheritance, no safety net. For weeks, Ashton wrestled with the decision. Anara tried to support him, tried to convince him that they could make it work without his father's money. They were young, educated, capable. They'd find a way. But fear is a powerful poison. Ashton remembered growing up watching his father destroy competitors, close failing divisions, fire thousands without blinking. Malcolm Fairchild didn't make idle threats. If Ashton walked away, he would be alone in a world that required money for everything: rent, food, medical care. How could he ask Anara to suffer through poverty with him when he had the power to provide? So he made a choice. He joined Fairchild Industries as a junior executive, working 70-hour weeks to prove he belonged. The work consumed him. Mornings began before sunrise. Nights ended after midnight. Weekends disappeared into spreadsheets and strategy meetings. Anara tried to be understanding. She brought him dinner during late nights at the office. She rescheduled dates when he cancelled. She smiled through the loneliness and told herself it was temporary. But temporary became permanent. Ashton missed her birthday, then their anniversary, then a crucial presentation she had worked on for months. Each absence chipped away at the foundation they had built, replacing love with resentment, connection with distance. The final breaking point came on a rainy April evening. Anara had planned a special dinner at their favorite small restaurant, the place where they'd had their first date. She wore the blue dress Ashton always loved. She waited at the table for 2 hours, watching her phone, refreshing her messages, hoping for an explanation. Ashton never showed. He was trapped in an emergency board meeting, his phone silenced, his mind focused entirely on a crisis that his father had thrown at him as a test. By the time he remembered, by the time he checked his phone and saw 17 missed calls, it was past midnight. He found Anara sitting on the steps outside his apartment, mascara streaked. Down her cheeks, the blue dress wrinkled and damp from rain. I can't do this anymore, she said before he could apologize. Her voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. Screaming he could have handled. But this quiet resignation felt final. I love you, Ashton. I love who you used to be. But that person doesn't exist anymore. Annie, please. You've made your choice. Your father, your company, your empire. I understand why. I really do. But I can't keep coming in second. I can't build a life with someone who's never actually present." She stood, and Ashton saw his entire future walking away. He should have chased her, should have quit the company right then, should have chosen love over money, should have fought for what mattered. Instead, he stood frozen, paralyzed by exhaustion and fear, and watched her disappear into the rain. That was the last time they spoke. 3 weeks later, Anara sat on the bathroom floor of her tiny apartment, staring at a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. The world tilted sideways. She was pregnant, alone, 23 years old with a degree in English literature and no job prospects beyond part-time retail. Her first instinct was to call Ashton. Her fingers hovered over his contact, the number she had dialed thousands of times, the voice she needed to hear more than anything. But then she remembered the look in his eyes that last night. Exhausted, distant, already halfway gone to a world of business deals and boardroom battles. Would he even want this baby? Or would he see it as another complication, another obstacle to the empire he was building? Worse, what if he thought she was lying, trapping him? She had heard stories of wealthy families and the lawyers they employed to make problems disappear. The thought of Ashton looking at her with suspicion instead of love was more than she could bear. So Anara made a decision. She would do this alone. She would protect this child from a father who might not want her, from a world that might see her as a mistake. She packed her few belongings, broke her lease, and bought a one-way bus ticket to Willowvale. Her grandmother's social security checks had stopped when she passed, but the memories of that quiet town remained. Anara had saved just enough for a security deposit on the small yellow house on Oak Street. The pregnancy was difficult, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made every movement feel like trudging through mud. But she worked through it, stocking shelves at the grocery store, shelving, books at the library, doing anything to prepare for the baby coming. She gave birth on a cold January morning, with only a nurse holding her hand. No family, no friends, no partner whispering encouragement. But when they placed that tiny, perfect baby girl on her chest, none of that mattered. Nalani, Anara whispered, choosing a name that meant serenity of the heavens. Because despite everything, this child was heaven-sent. Meanwhile, across 40 miles, Ashton sent letters to Anara's old apartment, dozens of them over the first year. Each one returned with addressee unknown stamped across the envelope. He tried calling. The number was disconnected. He asked mutual friends, but everyone had lost touch after graduation. Eventually, he convinced himself that Anara had moved on, found someone better, built the quiet life she always wanted without him. So he buried himself deeper in work, building an empire on the foundation of a broken heart, never knowing that his daughter was taking her first steps in a small yellow house just 40 miles away. Standing on Anara's porch with rain dripping from his tailored suit, Ashton knew he owed her more than apologies. He owed her the complete truth about the 5 years they spent apart. "Can we sit?" he asked quietly, gesturing to the porch swing that hung from rusted chains. Anara hesitated, then nodded. They sat on opposite ends, a careful distance between them, the swing creaking softly under their combined weight. Ashton stared at his hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts but had never changed a diaper, never braided hair, never held his daughter while she cried. "After you left," he began, voice low, "I tried to find you. I know you don't believe that, but I did." "The letters," Anara said softly. "You mentioned letters every week for the first 6 months. Then once a month after that." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through saved photos until he found what he was looking for. A shoebox filled with returned envelopes, each one stamped and rejected. He showed her the screen. Anara's breath caught. There were dozens of them. "I called your number until it was disconnected. I went to your old apartment building, but the landlord said you moved without a forwarding address. Privacy laws meant he couldn't tell me where." Ashton's jaw tightened. "I hired a private investigator after the first year. He searched for 3 months and found nothing. You had disappeared completely. I didn't want to be found, Anara admitted. I changed my phone number. I used my grandmother's maiden name on the lease. I was hiding. From me, from the life you represented, from the money and the pressure and the version of you I didn't recognize anymore. Ashton nodded slowly. That truth stung, but he understood it. My father died 2 years ago, he continued. Massive heart attack in his office. His last words to me were about quarterly projections. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. I inherited everything. The company, the estate, all of it. And you know what I felt? Anara waited. Nothing. I had achieved everything he demanded. I was worth billions. I had power, influence, respect from people who didn't even know me, and I felt absolutely hollow inside. He turned to face her, raindrops catching on his eyelashes. I thought about you every single day. I compared every woman I met to you, and they all fell short. I attended charity galas surrounded by hundreds of people and felt completely alone. Because none of them were you, Ashton. I'm not saying this to make you feel sorry for me, he interrupted gently. I'm saying it because you deserve to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Every success I've had tastes like ash, because I don't get to share it with the person who mattered most. Anara wiped tears from her cheeks. You still could have tried harder to find me. You're right, I should have. But pride got in the way. I convinced myself that if you wanted to be found, you would have reached out, that maybe you were happier without me. He laughed, a broken sound. Turns out, I was an idiot. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain providing a gentle soundtrack to their shared grief over wasted years. What happens now? Anara finally asked. That's up to you, Ashton said. I'm not going to force my way into Nalani's life, but I'm asking, begging, for a chance to know her, to be her father, if you'll let me. She's 4 years old, Ashton. She doesn't understand complicated adult relationships. She just knows that she's never had a daddy, and suddenly there's a man claiming to be him. Then we'll take it slow, however slow you need. I'll come here. I'll follow your rules. Whatever it takes. He met her eyes with an intensity that reminded her of the boy she fell in love with. I've already missed 4 years. I don't want to miss another day. Anara studied him carefully, looking for deception, for ulterior motives, for any sign that this was about guilt or obligation, rather than genuine love. What she saw instead was a broken man trying to put pieces back together, a father who had just discovered his daughter and was terrified of losing her before he even got to know her. Okay, she whispered. Okay? We'll try, slowly, carefully. But if you hurt her, I won't, Ashton promised. I swear on everything I have, I will never hurt that little girl. Before we continue this journey of forgiveness and second chances, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Someone who made mistakes but genuinely wanted to make things right? It's one of the hardest things we ever have to do, letting go of justified anger to make room for healing. Drop a comment below and share your story. Have you given someone a second chance? Did you regret it? Or was it the best decision you ever made? Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing hope over bitterness. And sometimes, that choice changes everything. While Anara and Ashton sat on the porch negotiating the fragile terms of their new reality, Nalani was next door, in Lucille's cozy living room, eating chocolate chip cookies and asking questions that only children dare to ask. Miss Lucille, Nalani's small voice cut through the quiet hum of the television. Is that man really my daddy? Lucille, a 72-year-old widow who had lived on Oak Street for 40 years, set down her knitting and looked at the child with gentle eyes. What does your heart tell you, sweetheart? Nalani considered this seriously, her little brow furrowing in concentration. At 4 years old, her understanding of the world was still magical, a place where butterflies could grant wishes and hearts spoke louder than logic. My heart says yes, she finally answered. He has my eyes, and his voice sounds like home, even though I never met him before. Children have an uncanny ability to sense truth beneath layers of adult complication. While Anara and Ashton wrestled with 5 years of pain and miscommunication, Nalani had made her assessment in under 5 minutes. "Then maybe your heart is right," Lucille said softly. "But why wasn't he here before?" Nalani's voice trembled slightly. "Doesn't he love me?" This was the question every child of separated parents eventually asks. The wound that cuts deepest, the fear that somehow they weren't enough to make someone stay. "Oh, honey." Lucille pulled Nalani into a warm hug. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big, messy, complicated mistakes. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. Sometimes it just means they didn't know how to find their way home until something special showed them the path." "Like the butterflies?" Nalani asked, remembering the orange butterflies she had seen that morning. "Mommy says butterflies are special. They start as caterpillars, all crawly and stuck on the ground. But then they change into something beautiful that can fly." Lucille smiled. This child was wiser than most adults. "Exactly like the butterflies, sweetheart. People can change too. They can transform into better versions of themselves." Nalani thought about this while munching on another cookie. So Daddy was like a caterpillar before, and now he's becoming a butterfly. Something like that. Through the window, Nalani could see her mother and the man on the porch. They were talking, not yelling anymore. Her mommy was crying, but not the scared kind of crying from earlier. This was different. "I want to meet him for real," Nalani announced suddenly. "Not just see him from far away. I want to tell him about my butterflies and my teddy bear and my favorite books. I want to show him my room." Before Lucille could respond, Nalani had already hopped off the couch and was heading toward the door. "Nalani, wait!" But the little girl was already outside, running through the rain in her butterfly pajamas. Her small feet splashing through puddles as she crossed from Lucille's yard to her own. Both Anara and Ashton looked up in surprise as Nalani approached the porch, completely soaked, her braids dripping water, but her face set with determination. "Nalani." Anara stood quickly. "Baby, you're getting wet. I want to talk to my daddy." The words came out clear, confident, brooking no argument. Ashton's face crumpled. Hearing that word, "Daddy," directed at him for the first time, shattered every wall he had built around his heart. Nalani walked right up to him, tilting her head back to look at his face. She studied him carefully, the way children do when they're making important decisions. "Are you going to stay this time?" she asked. The question was simple. The answer needed to be equally clear. Ashton knelt down so they were eye to eye. Rain fell around them, but neither seemed to notice. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If your mummy lets me, I'm going to stay. I'm going to be here for every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. I'm going to be the daddy you deserve." Nalani considered this. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Ashton froze for half a second, overwhelmed. Then his arms came up, carefully, reverently, holding his daughter for the first time. She was so small, so perfect, so absolutely his. "You smell different than I thought," Nalani said matter-of-factly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Ashton laughed through his tears. "Yeah? What did you think I'd smell like?" "I don't know. Maybe like the ocean. Or like fresh cookies." She pulled back to look at him. "You smell like grown-up stuff. Like Mommy's fancy candles." "I'll work on that," Ashton promised, smiling through the wetness on his face. Rain and tears mixed together. Nalani touched his cheek gently. "It's okay. I like you anyway." Those 5 words, simple, innocent, offered freely by a 4-year-old who had every right to be angry, healed something in Ashton that money could never touch. Behind them, Anara watched her daughter embrace the father she had kept hidden for so long. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite everything they still needed to work through, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years: hope. By the time the rain stopped, the world outside Anara's small yellow house looked cleaner somehow. Washed free of dust and debris, glistening under the late afternoon sun that was beginning to peek through the clouds. Inside, something was changing too. Ashton had removed his expensive suit jacket, draping it over a chair. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that had grown stronger over the years. He stood in Anara's modest kitchen, a space that couldn't have been more different from his Manhattan penthouse, and asked a question that surprised both of them. "Can I help with dinner?" Anara paused mid-step, a dish towel in her hands. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." His voice was gentle but firm. "I want to. Please." There was something disarming about seeing a billionaire CEO standing in her worn kitchen, genuinely asking to be useful. Anara found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "There's soup on the stove. It needs to be reheated. And I was going to make grilled cheese sandwiches for Nalani." Ashton moved to the stove with surprising confidence. "I can do that." Anara watched him work, noting the careful way he stirred the soup, testing the temperature before turning up the heat. "You learned to cook?" "Had to. Turns out money can buy private chefs, but sometimes at 2 in the morning you just want comfort food and solitude." He glanced at her with a slight smile. "I'm no master chef, but I won't burn down your kitchen." The domesticity of the moment felt surreal. 5 years ago, Ashton had barely known how to operate a microwave. Now, here he was, moving around her kitchen like he belonged there. While the soup warmed, he noticed the juice spill from earlier, the one from when Anara had collapsed. Without being asked, he grabbed paper towels and knelt to clean the sticky residue the paramedics had missed. "You don't need to do that," Anara protested. "It's just a spill, Annie." The nickname slipped out naturally, and both of them froze for a moment. Annie. He hadn't called her that in 5 years. Anara's throat tightened, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she joined him on the floor, helping wipe down the tiles. Their hands brushed accidentally, and the contact sent electricity through both of them, a reminder of what they once had, what might still exist beneath all the hurt. Lucille appeared at the screen door, Nalani's hand clasped in hers. The elderly woman's knowing eyes took in the scene, 2 people on their knees, cleaning a kitchen floor together, working in harmony despite everything. "Thought I'd bring this little one home," Lucille said warmly. "She's been asking about her parents every 5 minutes. Nalani burst through the door, her earlier exuberance tempered by exhaustion. The day's emotional roller coaster was catching up with her small body. She went straight to Anara, climbing into her mother's lap right there on the kitchen floor. "Mummy, are you feeling better?" "Much better, baby girl." Anara kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being so brave today." Nalani's eyes drifted to Ashton, who remained kneeling a few feet away, watching his daughter with undisguised awe. "Is Daddy staying for dinner?" The question was asked with such casual innocence, as if having a father was something that had always been part of her life, rather than a reality only hours old. Ashton looked to Anara, waiting for permission. The ball was in her court. Anara took a deep breath. Every instinct screamed caution. They hadn't resolved anything. There were still so many questions, so many wounds that needed addressing. But looking at Nalani's hopeful face, looking at Ashton's careful respect for her boundaries, she made a choice. "Yes," she said softly. "Daddy's staying for dinner." Lucille helped set the small wooden table while Ashton finished the soup, and somehow managed to produce perfectly golden grilled cheese sandwiches. The older woman watched the dynamics with quiet satisfaction, seeing something these two hadn't yet admitted to themselves. "You know," Lucille said conversationally as she folded napkins, "I've lived next door for almost a year now, Anara. I've watched you come home exhausted, every single night. Watched you carry groceries up those steps alone. Watched you shovel snow last winter by yourself while Nalani watched from the window." Anara felt her cheeks warm. "Lucille, I'm not criticizing, honey. I'm just saying it's about time someone helped shoulder the load." The older woman's eyes shifted to Ashton meaningfully. Some burdens weren't meant to be carried alone. Ashton absorbed this information like a punch to the gut. 6 months ago, while he was closing a deal in Tokyo, Anara was shoveling snow alone. Last winter, while he vacationed in the Alps, his daughter watched from a window, wishing for help that never came. The weight of his absence settled heavier on his shoulders. "That changes now," he said quietly. "If Anara allows it, I'll be here. For both of them." Lucille patted his arm approvingly. "Good man." She headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Ashton? Nalani likes her sandwiches cut diagonally, not straight across. Makes them taste better, apparently." After she left, Ashton looked down at the sandwiches he'd cut into neat rectangles. Such a small detail, such an enormous gap in his knowledge of his own daughter. He caught Anara watching him, saw understanding in her eyes. "There's a lot I don't know about her," he admitted. "Then you'll learn." Anara stood, brushing off her jeans. One meal at a time, one day at a time. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something better. It was a door opening, just a crack, letting in the possibility of what could be. Ashton carefully recut the sandwiches diagonally while Nalani cheered his technique from her chair, and for the first time in 5 years, the small yellow house on Oak Street felt like it was becoming a home for 3 instead of just 2. Dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated by Nalani's chatter about the butterflies she had seen that morning. A lifetime ago, it seemed, though only hours had passed. She told Ashton about each one in vivid detail, her small hands fluttering to demonstrate their wing patterns. Ashton listened with complete attention, asking questions that made Nalani light up even more. What colors were they? How many were there? Did they land nearby? Anara watched this interaction with a complicated mix of emotions. Joy at seeing her daughter so happy, grief over all the conversations like this that Ashton had missed, and underneath it all, a fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. By 7 o'clock, Nalani was rubbing her eyes, exhausted from the day's emotional upheaval. Anara carried her upstairs for a bath and bedtime routine, leaving Ashton alone in the living room, with instructions to make himself comfortable, words that felt both generous and tentative. When Anara came back down 30 minutes later, she found him studying the photographs on the mantel. Baby pictures. First birthday. Nalani covered in spaghetti sauce. Nalani dressed as a butterfly for Halloween. An entire life documented in frames. "She's beautiful," Ashton said without turning around. "You did an incredible job raising her." "I did what I had to do." Anara moved to the small couch, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. But it wasn't always enough. There were months I couldn't afford new shoes for her. Times when I chose between paying the electric bill and buying her medicine. Ashton turned, pain etched on his face. "That should never have happened. If I had known." "But you didn't know, and that's the reality we have to live with." Anara gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit. We need to talk about what happens next." Ashton sat on the edge of the armchair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The posture of a man bracing for difficult truths. "I want to be clear about something," Anara began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I didn't keep Nalani from you out of spite. I kept her from you out of fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear that you'd reject her. Fear that you'd see her as an obligation rather than a blessing. Fear that your family's lawyers would paint me as someone trying to trap you." She met his eyes. "But mostly, I was afraid that if I let you into her life and you left again, it would destroy her." Ashton nodded slowly. "That's fair. Given how I acted back then, all of those fears were justified. But she's asking questions now. She's getting older. And today proved that secrets have a way of coming out, whether we're ready or not. So, what do you need from me?" Ashton asked. "Tell me your terms, your boundaries. Whatever makes you feel safe." Anara had been thinking about this since the moment she agreed to let him stay. She'd spent Nalani's bath time mentally preparing for this conversation. "First, we need to establish paternity legally. Not because I doubt it. Anyone with eyes can see she's yours. But because she deserves to have her father's name on her birth certificate. She deserves legal protection. If something happens to me." "Agreed. I'll have my lawyer draw up papers. We can do a DNA test if you want, though like you said, it's pretty obvious." "Second, I need you to understand that you don't get to swoop in and change everything overnight. Nalani has a routine. She has stability here, even if it's not luxurious. I won't have you disrupting her life with extravagant gifts and promises you might not keep. Ashton's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'm not trying to buy her love. I'm trying to earn it. Good. Because she needs consistency more than she needs money. Anara paused, gathering courage for the next part. Third, we need to figure out custody arrangements. I'm not going to keep you from her, but I also won't have her shuffled back and forth like luggage. She needs to know where home is. Home is here, Ashton said immediately. With you. I'm not going to take her away from the only parent she's ever known, but I would like to visit regularly, stay involved in her daily life, maybe eventually have weekends, if she's comfortable with that. The reasonableness of his requests caught Anara off guard. She'd been prepared for a fight, for demands backed by expensive lawyers. Instead, he was deferring to her judgment. You'd be okay with that? Just visits? Annie, I have zero claim to dictate terms here. I wasn't there for the pregnancy, the birth, the sleepless nights, the first steps. You did all of that alone. The least I can do is respect that you know what's best for her. He ran a hand through his hair. Besides, I live in Manhattan. My life is there. I can't ask you to uproot Nalani from the only home she's known. What if... Anara hesitated, uncertain if she should even voice the thought forming in her mind. What if you had a place here, in Willowvale? Nothing fancy. Just somewhere you could stay when you visit, so Nalani can see you regularly without the chaos of going to the city. Ashton's eyes widened slightly. You'd be okay with that? With me being nearby? I think Nalani would be okay with that. And that's what matters. She twisted her hands in her lap. Look, I'm not saying this will be easy. There's a lot of hurt between us, a lot we need to work through. But we're not the priority anymore. She is. Ashton agreed softly. Everything else is secondary. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 4 years of separation beginning to lift ever so slightly. I need you to know something else, Ashton said eventually. The money. I'm not going to apologize for having it, because it means I can provide for Nalani now in ways I couldn't before. Medical care, education, college fund, whatever she needs. But I'm also not going to throw money at problems and call it parenting. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be here for the small stuff. The bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the school plays, the boring, beautiful, ordinary moments that make up a childhood. His voice cracked slightly. I've already missed 4 years of those moments. I don't want to miss any more. Anara felt tears prick her eyes. This was the Ashton she remembered, the one who valued presence over. Presence, who understood that love was measured in time, not dollars. Okay, she whispered. We'll try. For Nalani. For Nalani, he echoed. But both of them knew there was more happening here than just co-parenting. Sitting in this small living room, negotiating the future, they were also beginning to heal the wounds of the past. It would take time. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. But for the first time in 5 years, they were moving in the same direction, together. Morning came softly to the yellow house on Oak Street. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, painting golden patterns across the kitchen floor. The storms from yesterday had passed, leaving behind a world that looked brighter, fresher, full of new possibilities. Anara woke to the smell of coffee, which was strange because she always made her own coffee, and she was still in bed. She pulled on a robe and padded downstairs to find Ashton in her kitchen. Already dressed in the spare clothes he'd retrieved from his car, he was attempting to operate her ancient coffee maker with the focused concentration of a man defusing a bomb. You stayed, Anara said, surprised. He looked up, offering a tentative smile. I slept in my car. Didn't want to overstep, but I also didn't want to leave without saying goodbye to Nalani. Hope that's okay. Before Anara could respond, small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Daddy! You're still here. Nalani launched herself at Ashton with the fearlessness only children possess. He caught her easily, spinning her once before setting her on the counter, something that made her giggle with delight. I promised I'd stay, didn't I? Ashton tapped her nose gently. "And I keep my promises." Watching them together, Anara felt something shift in her chest. The resemblance was undeniable now in the morning light. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way they both tilted their heads when thinking. "Can Daddy stay for breakfast?" Nalani asked, turning hopeful eyes to her mother. "If he wants to," Anara said carefully. "I'd love to." Ashton glanced around the kitchen. "Though I should warn you, my cooking skills are limited to soup and sandwiches. Breakfast might be beyond my abilities." "I help Mommy make pancakes," Nalani announced proudly. "I can teach you." What followed was possibly the most chaotic and wonderful breakfast Anara's kitchen had ever seen. Nalani directed operations from her stool, instructing Ashton on exact measurements, while he tried to follow her sometimes confusing directions. Flour ended up on his shirt. Nalani got batter in her hair. The first pancake burned because they were too busy laughing to notice. But the second batch turned out perfectly. They ate at the small wooden table, the same table where yesterday Anara had collapsed. But today it held something different. Not just a mother and daughter, scraping by, but the beginning of something that resembled a family. "Tell Daddy about your butterfly book," Anara encouraged gently. Nalani's face lit up. She scrambled down from her chair and returned moments later with a worn picture book about monarch butterflies. She climbed onto Ashton's lap without hesitation, a trust that made his eyes shine with moisture. "See, they start as tiny eggs," Nalani explained, turning pages with syrupy fingers. "Then they're caterpillars. Then they make a chrysalis and sleep for a long time. And when they wake up, they're completely different. They can fly." Ashton listened as if she were explaining the secrets of the universe. "That's incredible. So they transform into something new." "Uh-huh. Mommy says people can transform too, that we can become better versions of ourselves." Over Nalani's head, Ashton's eyes met Anara's. The message was clear. We're transforming too, into something better than we were. After breakfast, Nalani insisted on showing Ashton her room. A small space painted, pale yellow, decorated with hand-drawn butterfly pictures and stuffed animals. She showed him every treasure, her rock collection, her favorite dress, the nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling. "And this is Mr. Buttons," she said, presenting her teddy bear. "He's been my friend since I was born. Mommy says he's very important." Ashton held the worn teddy bear carefully, as if it were made of glass. "He's clearly very loved. Just like you." From the doorway, Anara watched father and daughter bond over simple things. No expensive toys, no elaborate gestures, just presence, just time, just love. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the last of the clouds, and there, stretching across the sky from one end of Willowvale to the other, was a rainbow. Brilliant colors arcing over the small town like a promise. Nalani rushed to the window. "Look, the butterflies sent us a rainbow." Ashton joined her, kneeling to her height. "It's beautiful. You know what rainbows mean?" "What?" "They mean that after every storm, something beautiful can grow. They mean hope." Nalani considered this, then took his hand in her tiny one. "I'm glad you came, Daddy, even if it took a long time." Ashton's voice was thick when he answered. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." And in that small yellow house, beneath a rainbow that seemed to bless their new beginning, 3 hearts that had been broken began, slowly, to heal. 3 days after the phone call that changed everything, Ashton sat across from Anara at her kitchen table with a folder of documents between them. Outside, Nalani played in the backyard under Lucille's watchful eye, her laughter drifting through the open window. "I had my attorney draw these up," Ashton said, sliding the first set of papers across the table. "This establishes paternity and adds my name to Nalani's birth certificate. No strings attached, just the legal recognition that she's my daughter." Anara scanned the documents, her librarian's eye catching the details. It was straightforward, exactly as he'd described. No hidden clauses, no attempts to claim custody. "And this," he continued, producing another document, "is a college fund. It's set up in Nalani's name, with you as the primary trustee until she's 18. I've started it with enough to cover any university she chooses, plus graduate school if she wants. Anara's hands trembled slightly. Ashton, this is non-negotiable, he said gently. She's my daughter. Her education is my responsibility. This isn't about buying my way into her life. This is about making sure she has opportunities. The third document made Anara's breath catch. Medical insurance. Full coverage for both of you, effective immediately. The policy I selected covers everything. Routine checkups, emergencies, dental, vision. You'll never have to choose between Nalani's medicine and the electric bill again. Tears pooled in Anara's eyes. For 4 years, she'd carried the weight of every decision alone. Now someone was offering to help shoulder that burden, not as a savior swooping in, but as a partner taking responsibility. There's one more thing. Ashton pulled out a final folder. I put an offer on a house 2 streets over. 3 bedrooms, small yard, needs some work. It's nothing fancy, but it's close enough that I can be here regularly without crowding you. Anara looked up sharply. You're moving to Willowvale. Not full-time. I still have responsibilities in the city, but I'm restructuring my role at the company, promoting my COO to handle day-to-day operations. I'll commute to Manhattan when necessary, but my home base will be here. He met her eyes. I meant what I said. I'm not missing any more of Nalani's life. That's a huge change for you. It's necessary. Ashton leaned back in his chair. I've spent 5 years building an empire, and you know what? It's hollow. Money, power, success. None of it matters if I'm alone in a penthouse wondering what my daughter's favorite color is. It's purple, Anara said softly. With sparkles, he smiled. See? That's the kind of thing I need to know. The little details that make her who she is. Anara traced the edge of the medical insurance document with her finger. I need you to understand something. This doesn't fix us, you and me. That's complicated. I know. We're not getting back together just because we have a daughter. We're not playing house and pretending the past 5 years didn't happen. I know, Ashton repeated quietly, and I'm not asking for that. What I'm asking for is a chance to co-parent our daughter, to build trust between us again, not as lovers, but as 2 people who both love Nalani more than anything. And if that's all it ever is, co-parents and nothing more? The question hung heavy in the air. Ashton considered it carefully before answering. Then that's enough, because she deserves 2 parents who work together, even if they're not together. He paused. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't hope for more someday, when you're ready, if you're ever ready. Anara appreciated his honesty. No pressure, no demands. Just quiet hope held at a respectful distance. Okay, she said finally. We try this. Slow, careful, with Nalani as the priority. Always. They spent the next hour working out logistics. Ashton would visit 3 times a week initially, enough for Nalani to grow comfortable, not so much that it overwhelmed her routine. Weekends would be flexible based on Nalani's comfort level. All major decisions about her education, health and welfare would be made jointly. One more thing, Anara added. No extravagant gifts. I don't want her thinking love equals expensive toys. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to spoil her occasionally on birthdays. Occasionally, Anara stressed. She needs to understand the value of things. Deal. As Ashton gathered the signed documents, preparing to leave, Nalani burst through the back door, cheeks flushed from playing. Daddy! Come see the caterpillar I found. The joy in her voice, the ease with which she called him Daddy, made everything worth it. Ashton looked at Anara, silently asking permission. She nodded. Lead the way, sweetheart, he said, taking Nalani's outstretched hand. And just like that, they began writing a new chapter. Together. News travels fast in small towns, but it travels even faster when billionaires are involved. Within a week, the story had leaked. Not from Anara or Ashton. Both had been careful to protect Nalani's privacy. But Willowvale was a town of 3,000 people, and when a man in a designer suit starts buying property and visiting the librarian's house daily, people notice. A local blogger posted a story. Then a regional news outlet picked it up. Within 48 hours, national media was camped outside the small yellow house on Oak Street, cameras ready, questions prepared. Mr. Fairchild, is it true you have a secret daughter? Ms. Lomax, did you hide the child for money? How old is the girl? Will there be a custody battle? Ashton's legal team descended like a protective wall, issuing a carefully worded statement that confirmed Nalani's existence while demanding privacy for the family. It helped, but the attention didn't disappear overnight. For Anara, the sudden scrutiny was overwhelming. She couldn't go to the grocery store without whispers following her, couldn't take Nalani to the park without cameras clicking from behind trees. The quiet life she'd built was suddenly exposed to the world's judgment. "I'm sorry," Ashton told her during one particularly difficult evening, after a tabloid had run a story speculating about whether Anara had been a gold digger. "This is my fault, my world. You and Nalani shouldn't have to deal with this." "It's not your fault that people are intrusive," Anara said, though her exhaustion was evident. "But we need to protect Nalani. She doesn't understand why strangers want to take her picture." Ashton hired security, discreet but effective. Within days, the media presence outside their homes diminished. He also had his attorney send cease and desist letters to outlets that violated their privacy or printed false information. But not all the attention was negative. Letters began arriving from single mothers across the country, sharing their own stories of raising children alone. They thanked Anara for showing strength and resilience. They thanked Ashton for stepping up when he learned the truth. One letter, from a woman in Ohio, brought tears to Anara's eyes. "You give us hope that, even when we feel invisible, our children might still find their missing pieces. Thank you for showing that families can heal." For Nalani, the changes were both exciting and confusing. Suddenly, she had a father who showed up for dinner, who read bedtime stories in funny voices, who taught her to ride a bike and caught her when she fell. But she also had strangers asking questions at preschool, had teachers treating her differently, had a life that felt too big, too complicated for a 4-year-old to understand. One night, she crawled into Anara's bed, teddy bear clutched tight. "Mommy, are people mad at you because of Daddy?" Anara's heart broke. "No, baby. People are just curious. Sometimes when something unusual happens, everyone wants to know about it. Is having a daddy unusual?" "No, sweetheart. But the way you found your daddy, that was special. Like a story from one of your books." Nalani thought about this. "I like that story. Even if other people are nosy." Despite the chaos, something beautiful was emerging. Ashton's business contacts rallied to support local Willowvale initiatives. The library where Anara worked received a massive donation for a children's literacy program. The local school got new playground equipment. "You didn't have to do this," Anara told him when she learned about the donations. "I didn't do it for recognition," Ashton replied. "This town gave my daughter a home when I wasn't there to provide one. This is just paying that kindness forward." The ripple effect of one desperate phone call continued expanding. Families reached out to estranged relatives. Single parents found courage to ask for help. People who had given up on second chances began to believe again. One 4-year-old girl's cry for help had created waves that touched more lives than anyone could have predicted. Because sometimes, when you're brave enough to reach out in your darkest moment, you don't just save yourself. You remind the world that miracles still happen, that broken things can be mended, that it's never too late to come home. 6 months later, the small yellow house on Oak Street had undergone some changes. Fresh paint covered the chipped window frames. The garden bloomed with flowers Ashton and Nalani had planted together. A new swing set stood in the backyard, built by a billionaire who'd watched 3 YouTube tutorials to get it right. Inside, the kitchen table that had once witnessed a collapse now hosted weekly family dinners. What had started as 3 carefully scheduled visits per week had naturally evolved into something more organic. Ashton dropping by for breakfast before Nalani's school, joining afternoon park trips, and these Wednesday night dinners that had become sacred tradition. Tonight, Nalani sat between her parents, chattering about her day at kindergarten, her vocabulary peppered, with big words she'd learned from her father and creativity she'd inherited from her mother. And then, the butterfly landed right on my hand, she exclaimed, eyes wide with wonder. Just like magic. Just like the butterflies that brought us together, Ashton said, catching Anara's eye across the table. Something had shifted between them over these months. Not quite romance. They were both too cautious, too aware of past wounds to rush. But friendship had bloomed where love once lived. Trust was growing in soil that had been scorched by abandonment. And sometimes, when Nalani fell asleep between them during movie nights, their hands would brush and neither would pull away. They were healing, all three of them. Anara had quit her weekend job at the grocery store. Not because Ashton demanded it, but because she no longer had to choose between time with her daughter and financial survival. She'd started writing the children's book she'd always dreamed about, a story about butterflies, second chances, and families that find each other against all odds. Ashton had discovered that being present mattered more than being powerful. He'd missed Nalani's first 4 years, but he was determined not to miss another moment. Every scraped knee, every lost tooth, every terrible kindergarten play where she dressed as a flower. And Nalani, she thrived, secure in the knowledge that she was loved by both parents, growing more confident each day, still obsessed with butterflies, still wise beyond her years, still the miracle that had brought two broken people back together. This story began with a desperate phone call. A 4-year-old's trembling fingers, a random number that turned out to be fate. But here's what I want you to remember. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become doorways to the best chapters. Sometimes what breaks us also shows us how to heal. Sometimes the people we've lost find their way back to us when we need them most. Second chances aren't guaranteed. Forgiveness isn't easy. Building trust after betrayal takes courage and time. But it's worth it. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and join the Mr. Roman's Story Vault family. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that miracles still happen. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever been given a second chance? Or have you given one to someone else? Because every story shared is a reminder that we're not alone, that broken families can mend, that children can be bridges between impossible distances, and that sometimes all it takes is one phone call to change everything. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.